They stay present during emotional discomfort. This is one of the most powerful and telling signs that an avoidant is not pushing you away, but in fact is deeply in love. Avoidant individuals tend to retreat when emotions become intense. It's their default coping mechanism, a way to self-soothe, protect themselves from vulnerability, and regain control. But when an avoidant chooses to remain in the space where emotions are heightened, when they fight their instinct to flee and instead stay with you, it's not avoidance, it's love speaking through. Their courage, staying present, doesn't mean they suddenly become experts at emotional conversations. They may not respond with eloquence or deep empathy right away. But the simple act of not walking out the door, of sitting through your tears, of staying on the phone even when the conversation gets uncomfortable, that is their version of saying, I care too much to run. It's in these moments that their emotional growth begins to show. They are not just tolerating discomfort. They are enduring it because they value you more than the safety of avoidance. You may see this when you're upset and they don't retreat into silence like they used to. Instead, they stay seated, quietly listening, perhaps unsure of what to say, but still there. You might expect them to shut down or change the subject, but they don't. Maybe they fidget, maybe they breathe heavier, maybe they seem anxious, but they stay. That is monumental for someone who was once ruled by the need to emotionally escape. Staying present for an avoidant is not just a sign of maturity. It's a declaration, you are more important than my comfort zone. It also shows up in conflict. Where they once might have stonewalled, ghosted, or distracted themselves with work or withdrawal, they now begin to stay grounded. They start asking questions instead of making assumptions. They listen even if their face remains stoic. You might not get big emotional reactions from them, but their consistency and presence reveals how far they've come. Avoidants don't typically engage in emotionally charged situations unless love has changed their framework. Unless the connection has become a part of them they're unwilling to lose. In love, they start making space for emotional messiness. Not because it's easy for them, but because they're beginning to understand that intimacy requires it. The old version of them would have seen discomfort as a threat. The evolving version sees it as an opportunity to show up for you, an opportunity to stay connected, an opportunity to build something that doesn't dissolve at the first sign of emotional turbulence. This shift, though small in appearance, speaks volumes about their internal transformation. Staying present also means they allow you to have your emotions without trying to shut them down. They may not offer perfect solutions, but they stop trying to fix or flee. They learn to hold space. Maybe awkwardly, maybe silently, but they hold it nonetheless. They might hand you a glass of water, sit quietly nearby, or give you a comforting glance instead of turning away. These seemingly small gestures are, in truth, monumental for someone who used to protect themselves by becoming emotionally unavailable. Another sign is that they start owning their role in emotional dynamics. When you express frustration or sadness, they stop minimizing your feelings. They may not be perfect at validating you, but they resist the urge to invalidate. They begin to recognize that staying through emotional discomfort is more valuable than being right or emotionally distant. That shift doesn't come from obligation. It comes from emotional investment, from love. Even their body language may begin to reflect this change. Instead of turning away, they face you. Instead of folding their arms or looking at the ground, they make more eye contact, lean in slightly, or sit still when they'd rather be anywhere else. These physical choices signal their emotional commitment. They're no longer trying to escape the moment, they're learning how to be part of it. And that is how you know they're not avoiding you anymore. They're staying through the storm because you matter more than their fear. When an avoidant stays present during emotional discomfort, it's not just a behavioral shift. It's a transformation at the deepest level of their relational programming. It means they're choosing connection over protection, love over fear, growth over habit, and that kind of presence. That is one of the most undeniable signs that they're not avoiding you at all. They're falling in love, one uncomfortable moment at a time. They begin to prioritize your needs without being asked. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, the idea of attuning to another person's emotional or practical needs can feel overwhelming, even threatening. It challenges their internal narrative of self-sufficiency, their lifelong strategy of detachment, and their need to maintain control. But love shifts things. Quietly, gradually, it breaks through the wall, and suddenly they find themselves thinking of you, not out of obligation, but from a place of deep emotional investment. This prioritization may not show up in grand gestures. It often begins subtly. You might mention you're stressed, and the next day, they send you your favorite snack or a calming playlist. You might say you have a big meeting, and they text a simple "you've got this" that morning. These small actions are not coincidental. They are intentional. They are a reflection of emotional awareness they've never fully practiced before, now brought to life because your comfort and happiness matter to them. What makes this so significant is that avoidants are not naturally focused in relationships. Their emotional wiring is often built around self-preservation. But when they begin to love, your needs start to interrupt their internal focus. They start to remember what matters to you. They keep track of your likes, your dislikes, your emotional triggers, and your routines. You may not even notice at first, but they begin to plan around your well-being. They start to offer help before you ask. They anticipate, and that anticipation is love in its most thoughtful form. They also begin to listen more deeply, not just to your words, but to your silences. They notice when something is off, when your energy shifts, when you seem tired or anxious. And instead of ignoring it, they lean in. They might not say much, but they'll offer support in their own language, doing small tasks for you, making space for you to rest, or just being available without pressure. These aren't passive acts. They are active signs of emotional commitment. Even in conflict, this shift becomes visible. Where they might have once dismissed your feelings, they now make an effort to acknowledge them. They may not always agree, but they stop trying to defend or escape. They begin to ask themselves, what does she need right now? And in doing so, they start stepping outside their comfort zone, not to please you, but to show up for you. That's how love reshapes their priorities. You might see them sacrificing little things, choosing time with you over their usual solo habits, adjusting plans to accommodate your schedule, or compromising in ways they never used to. Again, this isn't because you demanded it. In fact, you may have said nothing. But love whispers to them, she matters, pay attention. And they do because their heart is now invested in your experience. What's truly powerful about this transformation is how genuine it is. Avoidants don't perform for approval. They're not typically driven by a desire to impress, so when they begin to put you first in small, consistent ways, it's coming from a place of real feeling. They may not express it verbally, but they are saying through their actions, you're important to me, I see you, I want to meet you where you are. Even in moments of stress or distance, they don't forget you. They might go quiet, but they still consider your needs. They still show up in the ways they can. They'll drop off something you need, check in without expectation, or offer quiet gestures that say, you're still in my heart, even when I don't know how to say it. When an avoidant begins to prioritize your needs, especially without prompting, it marks a profound shift in their emotional landscape. They are no longer simply trying to protect their own peace. They are beginning to co-create a space where your happiness matters as much as theirs. And that kind of unspoken, unsolicited care is one of the clearest, most authentic indicators that they're not avoiding you anymore. They're in love with you, and they're starting to live like it. They make room for you in their private world. For someone who typically keeps others at arm's length, allowing you into the places they usually guard is not just a gesture. It's a profound emotional shift. Avoidants often create strong internal boundaries to protect their independence and avoid emotional entanglement. They have routines, rituals, spaces, and thoughts that are theirs alone. But when they fall in love, something subtle but significant begins to happen. They start opening the doors to the parts of themselves they've long kept locked. You might notice this when they begin sharing personal stories, not just surface-level memories, but experiences tied to their past, their pain, their dreams, or their fears. This kind of disclosure doesn't come easily. For someone who has survived by avoiding vulnerability, even a short sentence about childhood, past relationships, or insecurities is an invitation into their inner sanctuary. They don't do it to impress you. They do it because your presence has started to feel safe, and in that safety, their heart begins to soften. Another major sign is when they begin to physically include you in their life beyond just dates or surface-level encounters. They invite you into their home, their routine, their rhythm. Maybe they let you see how they live when no one's watching, their quiet habits, their creative spaces, their morning routines, or even their messy kitchen. They might show you their favorite spots, the places they go to recharge, or introduce you to friends or family members they usually keep separate. For an avoidant, sharing space is symbolic. It means, this isn't just mine anymore. There's room here for you too. You may also see them begin to soften their stance on long-term planning. Where once the future was off, limits or vague, they now start including you in it. Subtly at first. Maybe they mention future trips and say we, instead of I. Maybe they casually bring up how you'd fit into their 5-year goals. These glimpses into tomorrow are not just hopeful thinking. They are evidence that your presence is not temporary in their mind. They are picturing you beside them, not because you pressured them to, but because love is rewriting their assumptions about closeness. In their private world, there's often a great deal of internal dialogue, thoughts, doubts, reflections they rarely share with others. So when they begin to open up about what they're thinking or how they process things, it's another sign that you've crossed a threshold. It's a deep, unspoken trust. They might still struggle to name their emotions, but they're starting to let you see behind the curtain. They're inviting you into the quiet space where their real self lives raw, unfiltered, unsure. Even access to their emotional timing is a form of intimacy. Avoidants often need time to themselves to recharge or regroup. If they start sharing when and why they need that space instead of simply disappearing, it's a huge step toward emotional transparency. They're not just taking space, they're making space for you to understand them. And in doing so, they're inviting you deeper into their emotional experience. You may notice them becoming more consistent in communication, not because they've suddenly become extroverted or expressive, but because they care how their absence affects you. They may send updates, check in after being quiet, or explain things they once would have left unsaid. These aren't just habits, they're quiet promises. Promises that say, you're part of my world now, and I want you to stay. When someone who has long feared closeness starts to bring you into their private life, they are no longer avoiding connection. They are nurturing it, not loudly, not perfectly, but steadily. They're building a bridge from their solitary island toward you. And every step they take, every space they open, every story they share, is an act of love. So when they welcome you into the parts of themselves they've always kept hidden, from their thoughts to their home to their future plans, they're not just letting you in. They're saying without words, asterisk, you belong here now, not just as a guest, but as someone I no longer want to keep out, asterisk. They begin to break their own patterns for you. Avoidant individuals live by well-established patterns, routines, defenses, habits of detachment that serve as emotional armor. These behaviors aren't random, they're designed for survival. To protect themselves from vulnerability, they keep control, remain self-reliant, and pull away when intimacy grows. But when real love enters their life, those old patterns start to crack. They begin to override their default behaviors, not because anyone forced them to, but because their heart starts to prioritize connection over protection. You may start noticing this in the smallest yet most meaningful ways. For example, the avoidant who once went silent during conflict now chooses to engage in the discussion. He doesn't storm out or shut down. He may not be fluent in emotional language, but he stays. He responds. He listens. That one shift, staying present when he'd usually escape, is a massive act of love. It's proof that he's choosing growth over habit, connection over comfort. Avoidants usually have strong boundaries around their time, energy, and emotions. So when they begin bending those rules to include you, whether it's opening up their schedule, changing how they communicate, or spending more time with you in vulnerable situations, it means that you are actively dismantling the walls they spent years building. Love challenges those old frameworks, and even though it's uncomfortable for them, they lean into the change. One of the most telling shifts is their response to emotional risk. In the past, when faced with rejection, conflict, or emotional expression, they may have distanced themselves immediately. Now, they might take a breath and stay. They may start to say things like, asterisk, this is hard for me, but I'm trying. Asterisk, even that single sentence is revolutionary for someone who once avoided emotional exposure at all costs. It means they are now more afraid of losing you than they are of being uncomfortable. You'll also see them start to reach out more consistently. Where they once waited for you to initiate contact, now they might text first, make plans, or follow up without prompting. These behaviors may seem normal in other relationships, but for an avoidant, they signal a fundamental shift. They're not just managing the relationship, they're investing in it. They're creating new emotional habits, rewiring how they relate, because something, or rather someone, has made it worth the risk. Their behavior during disagreements is another key indicator. Avoidants tend to be conflict-averse, especially when emotions run high. But when they care deeply, they stop running from hard conversations. Instead of giving you the silent treatment, they come back and say, asterisk, let's talk about it. Asterisk, or even more subtly, they show up the next day with a gesture of reconciliation. These changes are not manipulative. They're part of their process of becoming emotionally available in real time. Even their language begins to change. Where they once said, I don't do relationships, or I need my space, they now begin to include you in their vision. They speak in terms of we instead of me. They ask for your opinion, factor you into decisions, and allow their once rigid plans to become flexible. They begin to soften not by force but by choice, and it's not just about how they treat you, it's about how they treat themselves. They begin to reflect more, they notice their triggers, they may even start therapy, read about attachment, or talk about wanting to understand their reactions better. This inner work, often done quietly, is love in its most committed form. They're not just showing up for you. They're evolving because of you. When someone begins to override the protective reflexes they've always relied on, When they choose to stay instead of run, to communicate instead of shut down, to lean in instead of back away, are doing something brave. They are saying, asterisk, I am learning a new way of loving and you're the reason why. Asterisk, it's not always smooth or perfect. There will be setbacks, but the consistent effort to break their own emotional patterns is the ultimate proof that they're not avoiding you. They're building a path toward you. One unfamiliar, vulnerable step at a time. They communicate through actions, not just words. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, verbal vulnerability often feels like walking through fire. Saying, I love you, I need you, or even I'm scared to lose you, can trigger deep discomfort because it exposes them to rejection, dependency, or emotional unpredictability. But when they fall in love, their desire to connect doesn't just vanish, it reroutes. Instead of expressing love verbally, they begin to show it in subtle, consistent, deeply intentional ways that speak louder than words ever could. One of the clearest signs is reliability. You begin to notice they show up when it matters. They might not always say how they feel, but they make the effort to be there. Whether that means helping you move, being present during a hard moment, or simply keeping their promises. When they love you, actions like these are their way of saying, asterisk, you can count on me, I won't let you down, asterisk, that steadiness is no accident, it's love translated into commitment. They also start paying attention to the small things. They remember your preferences, your habits, your stories. They make your coffee just the way you like it. They fix things before you ask. They buy your favorite snack, not because you requested it, but because they were thinking of you. To the avoidant, love lives in the details. They may not shower you with praise or romantic monologues, but they are constantly observing, learning, and doing. These seemingly mundane gestures carry deep emotional weight. Their nonverbal language becomes more expressive, too. They may linger in hugs longer than before, hold your hand without needing a reason, or sit close to you in quiet moments. Physical presence, eye contact, a calming touch on your shoulder. These become their emotional vocabulary. In moments when words fail them, they communicate reassurance through proximity. Asterisk, I'm here. Asterisk, asterisk, I see you. Asterisk, asterisk, I care. Asterisk, they don't always say it aloud, but their body says it over and over again. You might also observe a shift in their rhythms and priorities. Time becomes one of the biggest things they give you. People with avoidant tendencies are usually protective of their independence, but love begins to change that. They start rearranging their schedule to fit you in, planning around your life, and being present during moments you value. Not because they feel obligated, but because you matter. The act of choosing you again and again without verbal fanfare is a profound declaration. They may also begin helping with things that stress you out, not because they think they can fix you, but because they want to lessen your load. If you're overwhelmed, they might quietly take over tasks, offer a ride, or run errands on your behalf. They may not say, asterisk, I'm doing this because I love you, asterisk, but they are. Their actions say it all. In their world, support is love, and doing is how they stay emotionally connected. Even during hard times, their actions reflect care. They might not offer long emotional talks when you're down, but they'll sit beside you, bring you comfort food, or check in later when it's easier for them to process. When avoidants love, they don't disappear during emotional storms. They anchor themselves silently nearby, present in quiet solidarity. They might not have the words to walk you through it, but they walk with you in the ways they can. And when they're afraid of losing you, it's their actions that intensify. They start reaching out more, showing up unexpectedly, or doing thoughtful things without needing to be asked. You might see them initiate touch, cook you a meal, or make practical efforts to be in your life more frequently. These are not just habits, they're intentional, emotionally driven attempts to keep the bond alive. Even if they still struggle with saying the right words, they're speaking fluently through what they do. So when you're wondering whether an avoidant loves you, don't just listen for words, watch their movements. Watch the consistency, the effort, the ways they protect your peace, hold space for you, and show up without being told. Their actions are often more honest than any sentence they could say. And if you pay close attention, you'll hear the quiet message that runs through every gesture, asterisk, I may not say it out loud, but I love you, and I'm proving it one action at a time, asterisk, they get protective of the bond. When someone with an avoidant attachment style falls in love, they don't just care from a distance, they begin to guard the connection in quiet, sometimes surprising ways. For a person who's spent most of their emotional life avoiding closeness to stay safe, the decision to protect the relationship rather than escape from it marks a powerful internal shift. Their fear of vulnerability doesn't disappear, but it becomes secondary to a new fear, losing the one person who made them feel emotionally seen. This protection doesn't always look dramatic. In fact, it often shows up in subtle, consistent behaviors. They may start noticing when you pull away emotionally, and instead of withdrawing as they usually would, they check in. Maybe it's a short message, asterisk, everything okay, asterisk, or maybe it's them showing up unexpectedly just to be near you. They might not say what they feel directly, but they sense a shift in the emotional climate and want to prevent the distance from widening. This proactive awareness is not typical of avoidance. It's an expression of care from someone who now feels they have something valuable to lose. You'll also see it in how they respond to perceived threats to the relationship. A sudden change in your tone, reduced availability, or time spent with others may trigger a reaction in them, not because they don't trust you, but because your absence now leaves a space they can't ignore. They may become more attentive, ask more questions, or even show signs of jealousy. These reactions aren't about control, they're about preservation. They're trying to hold on to something meaningful, even if they're still learning how to express that desire in a healthy way. Being protective also means they begin to adjust their behaviors not just for you, but for the sake of the relationship itself. Maybe they tone down sarcasm that once pushed people away. Maybe they try harder to be reliable, even if that hasn't been a strength before. Maybe they avoid behaviors that used to cause conflict or confusion, like going silent during disagreements or being dismissive when things get emotional. They begin to ask themselves, asterisk, how can I avoid damaging this connection? Asterisk, that question alone is a sign of emotional evolution. Another form of protection lies in how they handle your emotions. If you're hurt, sad, or vulnerable, they begin to show up more intentionally. They try to offer comfort even if they aren't sure how. They may bring you food, fix a small problem, or simply sit beside you quietly. They protect not only the bond but your emotional well-being, understanding, even if in subtle ways, that your peace impacts the health of the relationship. They begin to see love as something to tend to, not just something to feel. This protectiveness also extends to how they handle outside influence. If someone disrespects you, dismisses your needs, or speaks negatively about your relationship, you may notice them stepping up, defending you or the relationship in ways you didn't expect. Even if they're not outwardly confrontational, they will set boundaries. They may stop entertaining conversations that undermine your connection or distance themselves from people who cause unnecessary tension. To them, this is not just about loyalty, it's about safeguarding what they now see as precious. You might also observe changes in how they speak about the relationship. They stop joking about it being casual or temporary. They begin to use language that reflects commitment, safety, and permanence. Phrases like, I've got your back, we'll figure it out, or I'm not going anywhere become part of their vocabulary, not because they're suddenly romantic poets, but because the relationship has taken root in their life, and they're trying to water it in the only way they know how. Even in conflict, their protectiveness is visible. Rather than using fights as an excuse to leave, they return quicker. They apologize sooner, they try to repair instead of escape. It may not be polished or perfect, but the effort is there. They begin to value resolution over distance, connection over pride. They don't want the bond to break, even if they're still learning how to keep it strong. So when you notice an avoidant beginning to act more alert, responsive, even territorial over your connection, know this: they're not doing it out of habit. They're doing it because they've finally let someone into their emotional core, and now they're learning to guard that connection not out of fear, but out of love.